Meccano, part number 24, bush wheel, in blue, from the 1930s. Hi, if you want even more Meccano goodness, why don't you check out my Patreon channel? And please like and subscribe and leave a comment below. I post updates in the community section, not only for this week's Patreon build, but also for what I'm currently working on. Thank you, and back to the build. Hi folks, and welcome back. Normally at this point I tell you what this model is, and as this is one of the 1930s Aeroplane Constructor set, I go on a bit of a geek rant about them. Well, I'm not going to do that today. All I will say is that these models are as good as cucumber sandwiches and tea with strawberry jam scones and cream to follow, while watching a cricket match on a Sunday afternoon and saying, "Jolly good show." Did you know that cucumber contains a toxin, and overeating them can be life-threatening? Now, I'm not too sure about the last part, as I haven't fact-checked that bit all that much. But I eat a lot of veg, and cucumber was on that list, until last year, when I was getting ill. It turns out that somehow I have become intolerant to cucumber, which is annoying as I rather like them. Where was I? Oh yes, not going on a rant about just how perfect these models are. Mass transportation is so much part of our life today, and aircraft even more so. In fact, a quick check of the online flight radar website that I use shows nearly 1,000 aircraft in the air over Europe on the day of writing this script, including one Spitfire from the Battle of Britain flight and an American F-15 flying laps over the east coast of England around the area of the Wash. Air travel is normal, but like I said in the last script, it is a gift and one that belongs to the birds. In the beginning of commercial flight, the thought of carrying airmail was the first to mind. Then came the ability to carry people as well over longer distances, post-World War I, as converted ex-military planes became available. Soon after, commercial biplanes were built, like the Vickers Vimy Commercial, one of which flew daily from Croydon to Brussels for 14 years, from 1920 to 1934. But these aircraft could only carry a small number of passengers, with around 10 being the maximum. And when researching the accident rates and death rates on the Bureau of Aircraft Accidents Archive website, it shows that in 1919 there were 83 accidents and 50 deaths. But then air transport was in its beginnings. By 1930, some 6,000 people travelled commercially by air yearly. But there were 257 accidents and 308 people killed, so around 5% of all people who flew that year. Flying was a risky business, as well as an expensive one, but the standards a passenger could expect rivaled the best ocean-going liners of the period. This model is a commercial low wing monoplane, and today the style of the low wing is the most common for commercial use, where a runway is available. Otherwise, a high wing is a better option, as it gives better ground clearance. In the instructions, as always, you get a reference to an existing aircraft. In this case, it is the Junker F-13, designed by Hugo Junkers. There are few designers that can claim the fame that Hugo Junkers can. The man is truly one of the giants of the history of aeronautical engineering. I doubt if there is much in the air today that doesn't have some of his engineering at its heart. He inspired two of the world's most famous designers, Andrei Tupolev and William Bushnell Stout. The first you might well have heard of. The second maybe not so much. He is an American engineer who doesn't really get the recognition he deserves as the man who designed the first real American airliner to get the country connected, the Ford Trimotor. Hugo Junkers invented the cantilever wing pre-World War I. Post-war, the idea developed into the F-13, the world's most advanced commercial airliner of the period. It was constructed from 1919 through to 1932, with over 300 being built, a huge number of airframes at the time. It continued to work as a commercial airliner for more than 30 years. Unlike this model, which is braced, the F-13 was unbraced, a daring, bold statement to make at the time. By doing so, her Junkers reduced drag on the airframe. The strength to withstand the forces of lift came from the cantilever design of the wing, which was able to absorb the stresses. The downside to this is that it increases the weight of the airframe. The plus side is that it reduces drag, so you don't need the external bracing that is shown on this model. The reduced drag allows for less power consumption of the engines, which is less fuel carried for the same distance travelled, but the faith in the engineering was huge. One of the first users of the aircraft was the US Airmail Service. They were having a bad time of it in 1919 with 14 crashes, 13 of which were ex-wartime de Havilland DH-4 aircraft. 3 of the pilots died in the crashes. In 1920, they'd purchased a number of F-13s that had been built by Junkers in Germany, and then final construction was handled in the US by the Larsen Company, and numbered as JL6 for Junkers Larsen. On the 1st of September, Flight 305 was flying from Hazelhurst to Cleveland when the aircraft caught fire over Morristown, New Jersey. The crew of 2, pilot Max Miller and mechanic Gustav Heersen, managed to jettison all 9 bags of mail before the aircraft, far engulfed, crashed. Both the crew died. Max Miller had been the US Airmail Service's first pilot. All told, 89 F-13s met their fate. 4 of them were the US Airmail Services, 3 in 1920 and 1 in 1921. Less than 1/3 of all the aircraft. In this day and age, that would have had the whole fleet grounded, while the fault was sorted out. But in 1920s, the envelope was so small between doing and not doing that the line could so easily be crossed, all too often with fatal consequences. 124 people died in those crashes, in the earliest parts of the history of airline flights. But still, we pushed for flight. As I said, in 1930, records show some 6,000 people flew in the registered airlines. By 1938, that number was 1.2 million. In 2019, 4.5 billion people flew globally on the 5,000 airlines which are registered with the International Civil Aviation Organization, the ICAO. Hugo Junkers' goal when he designed the F-13 was safe mass transport for people with a reliable aircraft, and by the standards of the day, that's what he achieved. The F-13 served as a ground for the enlarged model that would follow, the Ju-52-3M. When the Nazi Party rose to power in the 1930s, her Junkers refused to support their push for the rearmament of the country, seeing without a doubt the evil within the party. In 1934, he was placed under house arrest as the party then took control of his designs and patents, while he was being indicted for the crime of high treason against the state. He died in 1935 at home. The company was seized by the then government, and against her Junkers' dream for his company, it went on to build some of the most successful warplanes that the Luftwaffe had during the war. Research is one of the skills that I've learned from this channel. From my early scripts at the beginning to what I'm writing now, I would like to believe there has been some improvement. But with the research, you also come across knowledge that leaves a sense of sadness. Hugo Junkers is one such case. Another is Max Miller, the ex-US Army pilot who had trained in the Philippines. His wife worked in the main office of the US Air Postal Service. The manager, the same man that hired him, would have received the telegraph informing him of the death of the crew. A crew that had shown dedication to duty by making sure the postal bags were jettisoned before they attended to their own future, not knowing by that time that it was too late. Looking at the world today, I wonder how many people would attend to duty first, and then their safety second, outside of our armed forces and emergency services. And I know from my own experiences of what that feels like, from my time in the ambulance service in Durham, and also working frontline mental health wards with some very, what you might call, interesting people to care for. The other thing that has surprised me is just how many people fly daily now. I had heard in the news reports of delays at airports, but reviewing the data for 2019 shows that over 12 million people in the air each day. So as the industry struggles under the pressure, the delays are only going to get worse. We've come to expect air transport to be a right, a form of transport that we are entitled to have, but it's not. 100 years ago, it was for the very rich only, and everyone else took a ship, a liner if you wanted speed, or a tramp steamer if you couldn't afford the prices. So, as this build comes to an end, I am always left with a real sense of joy with these kits. I truly just get a huge buzz out of these builds. They are, in my opinion, some of the finest meccano made by the company.